session as we are about to go live. Father, we particularly want to remember Tom at the hospital with whoever he is with. Father, we pray your healing hand be upon them. We also pray for Tom's father that you'll give him peace of mind, even to know that even in his absence, that is still within your plan, and therefore it shall be well for him and even for us as we attend the live this evening. Father, I pray that even as we speak tonight, Father, it shall not just be words from our hearts, but Father, it shall be ministry. May that be our heart posture. And may those that are listening in today, Father, receive a word in season for themselves and for the loved ones around them. We pray even for the fluctuations of the internet and power. Father, would you protect our time together? In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
We are going live now.
Okay. So where's the link?
Sending shortly.
Okay. I'll get it on WhatsApp or on Facebook.
You'll get it on WhatsApp in the group.
Okay. There you go.
The live stream has started now. The link is in the group.
I've opened it and we are starting. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much for Pastor Mweni and Reverend Ondachi for being here today. I'd like to apologize on behalf of Tom. He might join us or he might not join us. He has some family emergency, and we pray everything will be well on his end. So maybe Mweni, you could just say hi, and then Reverend Dachi just say hi before we kick off our Grieving the Nation topic 3.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, we are here having a conversation around all matters grief. I pray that we shall all learn something, because it is a season that we are all in, and it's a learning season for all of us, because this thing has no formula. Imagine you roll with the punches, but what we do is we get used to the reality of living with the loss. So karibuni. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Good to see you again. It is a wonderful learning and therapeutic session, even for us, believe it or not. As we sit here and discuss these matters, our own hearts feel very healed. I'm certainly speaking for myself and my fellow panelists that is as enjoyable for us as I believe it is for you. So we are delighted to invite you into our space for these very important discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we've actually walked a 3-week journey, would you imagine? And we thank God for keeping us in this the 3rd week as we're approaching Christmas. The malls, we know it's Christmas when we see malls starting to get decorated. Yeah. All malls are starting to get decorated. So yeah, so Christmas plan and budgeting, it's all with us. And tunashukuru Mungu. So the first session we discussed about when the unthinkable becomes the shared reality, when actually you've heard about a death or a loss, and then it becomes a shared reality as a nation. Then we went the next following weekend, we discussed when grief divides instead of uniting. You know, when there's a what ifs and blaming games, when it comes, you're blaming this other person for somebody's death or a catastrophe. Today, we are making meaning by truthfully giving voice to the collective pain. So we're actually giving voice to the collective pain. And I'll start with, as usual, Reverend Ondachi, just to give us the flow. Yeah. Our country, Kenya, has experienced a lot of pains. Yeah. We talk about floods, we talk about post-election violence, Westgate terrorism, dutist It's called, and landslides. Dusit. And the pandemic. So my question to you, Reverend, is how can faith communities help the nation to tell the truth about these wounds? Because we are all wounded one way or the other without reopening maybe the tribal or the political wounds. How can we have a collective pain without looking at people's tribes, people's tribal political affiliation? Just be together as a nation.
Thank you, Rosalind. You mentioned Dusit, and you just brought all manner of memories back flooding to me. The day that Dusit happened, I was around Westlands, around Westgate that morning, and a friend of mine and her son were inside the mall. And so I went to pick them, and then we were going to take some shopping to a friend of ours in HeartworkA. And when we arrived in HeartworkA, this thing was all over the news. And I'm like, I cannot believe. When I did the calculation backward, I discovered we had just driven out when the terrorists, or probably the terrorists were already in. When we were
Westgate.
At Westgate.
Uh-huh.
Let me tell you, this little boy had been inside that mall. They were shopping. That's where they shopped into the. Was it a Nakumat then? And I'm telling you, it was like watching a horror movie and feeling the shock. The husband to this lady I was with, they had not talked on the phone. You know the way you live on a Saturday. And so all the time he was thinking. He remembered that his wife was going into that mall to shop and then we leave. And we were watching the news. He believed his family was in that mall. I remember feeling the shock and coldness of this attack. So when you just mentioned it, all these emotions came flooding back. But I remember, Rosalind, the Sunday after that, we were in church, and there was this cloud that hung over the congregation. We were doing a very exciting series, but people just wanted to cry. And a very sensitive service host then asked the question, how many of you lost someone at Westgate? And in our congregation, maybe 400-500 people, we had about 8 hands go up. And let me tell you, everything changed. Absolutely everything changed. And I remember the preacher decided he was not going to preach. And it just became a time of grief and prayer. I'm so proud of what we did that day because that's what we needed. We needed to huddle together and cry. And this is Nairobi. And I guess because Nairobi is very cosmopolitan, we can share in that grief. When you mentioned the tribal thing, Rosalind, I feel sad, very, very sad, because as we said from week 1, our nation is so deeply divided around tribes. Sometimes we hear that floods have killed people in Kisii, in Turkana. Floods, people have, Nyando has flooded again, sides of Kisumu. And there are people who, if that's not your area, you can sense some sort of apathy, like this is just new. I was with a person one day and we saw that there was a lady people used to joke about saying Serikali's idea because the floods have come again.
The floods, yeah.
And people were blaming the area member of parliament. They were saying these floods come every year, they kill people in this area. And it just becomes this tribal thing that sometimes I'm saddened to admit that in different parts of our country, when something happens, it has been difficult to collectively mourn together. I think when something happens in the big cities, there is a sense that people from different tribes are in one place, and so we can share that grief. But I think our nation is yet to mature or grow into the space where the death of people in Coast, the death of people in Turkana, the death of people in Kakamega, in Kiambu can be our collective grief. Because when you have opportunity to travel to those places, I used to volunteer with the Red Cross years ago, and we would travel to some of these disaster places. And sometimes, depending on how small this community is, places like Wajir and Mandera, they would complain that it appears like we are not part of this country. Resources are so slow in coming, and you see women crying. There's a woman who was crying in Wajir one time because her baby had fallen off of her back and fallen into the river, and she said nobody cared about it. In fact, people told her around there that she had somebody commenting that you'll just get another one. And she said that if this was Nairobi, you would not see reaction. And it saddens me that at times we have this sense of classism that if something happens in Nairobi, it will catch world news. But if it is not, then people respond to it very, very tragically. I have tried personally, when I see a national tragedy and I'm on a pulpit, to stop the service and remind everyone that, guys, people died last night. I live in a place, in an area that just borders Kibera. And our helps in my estate, most of them come from this slum area. And sometimes when it rains heavily, we are guaranteed that somebody will be taken away in a flash flood. And so it touches us personally. And I think what the church can do is to constantly use the pulpit to sensitize people that one life lost is too many, and take a moment at that moment and pray. Pray for those families. Give people as much information as necessary, rally support and help, and see whether we can help either teams like the Red Cross, even the government, to assist them in what they need to do. I think we are heading there, but we need more sensitization from the pulpit, Rosalind.
I totally agree with you. Even when it comes to this, the Gen Z, what happened just early this year, I felt like the government actually did not really have a collective pain for those young people, because it seems like Parliament just continued. I believe until now something should have been done by the government, because I remember we had a training, and people had come from abroad. We had to stop the training just because it was so painful for all of us, even from foreigners. Well, it was painful to see young people die on the streets. It was the previous day. Now the following day we had to go for the training again. So I think we needed to have a collective pain, pain for even the Gen Zs this year, and all these other strategies. Today I'm like, I think I've had a busy day until my mind. I'm slurring, and my tongue seems to be heavy. When maybe you can jump in terms of what I'm trying to see is when one person carries the pain for the whole family. You're carrying that collective pain. You're the one telling everyone it's okay, but you've actually have not really mourned. So my question to you is what would you tell this person when they come for therapy, or if they're not seek help? What would you advise? What would you tell a person like that who's just carrying the pain for everyone in the whole family?
I hope you can hear me. I seem to be having my internet fluctuating.
you.
Oh, you can, eh? Okay, thanks. I like what Rev has said, because, and I said this, I think one of the other days we've had this. We are a trauma illiterate and a grief illiterate society. And that's not, to me, it's simply to mean that we are so unaware of what grief and trauma looks like. In fact, many times we just say, they're not crying, they're not grieving. We've reduced grief to simply crying, and we've also reduced grief to simply someone dying. We don't see collective grief as a collective responsibility. So even when we have collective grief, we want to take individual responsibility for it and cry in our own cocoons and grieve in our own cocoons, instead of being the awareness that collective grief needs to be responded to collectively. And churches can be able to be places that provide such spaces, because I mean, even if you had gone on with the sermon series, who would have listened to you?
Mhm.
You know, when I
Mhm.
was growing up, we used to be told this about being a Christian, that you always need to make sure that you're not too heavenly minded to be of no earthly good. So it means that your faith must be relevant to the world that you live in. So back to what you were asking, Rosalind, about when someone is the one that is carrying the pain of the family, how do you help them? First of all, grief is we grieve for what was lost. Grief is a pain of what was lost. And so grief essentially says something mattered, and therefore the absence of that thing hurts. And so what is it that you're grieving? What is it that you're sensing you have lost? Because grief honors what was. The second thing is to help them make meaning. Make meaning in that season of grief, because making meaning is about asking, uh, it's not about explaining the loss, by the way. That's not what making meaning is, because we can never explain loss. How do you explain death of a child? It is impossible to explain loss. So that's not what we are doing. In fact, and this is the part that sometimes I flinch when I listen to sometimes pastors preaching, even in funeral services or vigil services. Because remember that our role as pastors, by the way, imagine we are not God's PR agency, where we are coming to say, oh my goodness, this happened. Heaven was not aware. Heaven will check on this. You know, we are not God's PR agency. So we are not coming to apologize for what has happened. We are coming to say, even for you as a pastor, it's okay for you to say, I don't get it. We really believe, we prayed, and we really believed that so and so was going to leave. And they took a turn for the better. And so to have gotten the call that they have died, even I don't understand it. Because when we do that, what we are saying, what we are allowing people to do is make meaning of it, so that now we are able to understand, what has this pain uncovered? What still matters now that this pain has happened? How can love be alive even in the absence of my father? Is love still existing in my world when the person that I believed embodied love has died? That has love died? So that's what making meaning looks like. And so the third thing that you also need to help that person, and this now takes us to the place of healing, is healing does not mean forgetting. Healing will never mean forgetting. Let me just give you a simple reason why I say that. I lost my mom in February this year. Now, if anyone ever saw me and my mother, in fact, we used to joke about it when my husband was getting married to me. He was told, look at your mother-in-law. That's how your wife will look like in her old age. Because me and my mom really, really look alike. So if we reduce healing to forgetting, every time I look at the mirror, I'm going to remember my mother. In other words, every time I look at the mirror, I will never heal. Either that or I put the mirror away. You know, and so none of those things are practical. In fact, healing is not about forgetting. Healing is actually about remembering. It's about remembering, and about being able to remember with love and with grace and with truth. So healing is relearning how to live with the loss. And so when someone is the one that is carrying the weight of the grief for the family, remember that meaning is as individual as the grievers are. Healing is going to look different on different people, and also what is lost is going to look different on different people. We may be siblings, and we've lost a parent. We've lost the same parent, but each one of us is going to have different dimensions and perspectives, because we don't grieve over titles, we grieve over relationships.
Yes. Wow.
Oh, that's powerful. We don't grieve over titles, we grieve over relationships. That is very true. That's very true. And Gladys has got a very good comment, and she says a great sessions. Our different cultures and how we are cultured has influenced the way we grieve. Modeling into Christianity is what challenges us as a people. And I remember, to that comment, I remember Reverend, on that you touched on it, and maybe you can remind us what you said for the viewers or the listeners who are not here. How do we marry that Christianity and culture in terms of grieving? Just give us a short snap, and I know you said, and let me remind you where you came out from when Tom was talking about shaving of the head. Yeah, I remember that time. Yeah, just touch on that again.
It's important to know, I think, Rosalind, thank you for this question. It's important to know the nature of our country is that in so many ways we are 47 little countries. If you drive across our country from Mombasa all the way through either Kisii or Kisumu through Busia, you will encounter such different cultures, behaviors, even physical features of people. So different. Some people are very light-skinned, others are chocolate, others are very, very dark. Different kinds of beauties. You just look at Kenya and you can't believe this is one country. Kenya is actually a very complex country to lead because of the different behaviors of where people live. We are in so many ways a little United States of America. We're in a little way. We identify so much with the United States because in the US, you can tell from somebody's culture where they are from the South, where they are the East Coast, and the behaviors are very different. And that behavior is so strong. People have such strong tribal and cultural beliefs. It's unbelievable. Even within one tribal grouping, there are little sects. Where I come from, the Luyas, you can't just say I'm a Luya. People will ask you, which Luya are you? So you say I'm an Idaho, I'm a Marama, I'm a Maragoli, and the moment you say that, people box you to a certain behavior. It's so critical when it comes to marriage. Abukusu marrying an Idaho or a Marama is very different stuff. And right across the nation, that fabric is there. But we need to remember that God made us that way. And it's meant to bring glory to God that we are this differently tribal. So when Tom was talking about shaving of the head, it was a moment for education. When Honorable Raila Odinga passed away, the whole country was gripped with the fact that people rushed into the current home of Raila Odinga. And at that moment, then there were a lot of people who were explaining why that happens. And I think that is very important. I think the Tanzanians and the Ugandans are a step ahead of us in that regard because they don't feel as threatened as Kenyans feel by the behavior of their neighbors. For Kenyans, I think our affiliation to land is such a big deal. The Ugandans and the Tanzanians don't understand why Kenyans are so obsessed with land. And for us, because of that, then there is a very big threat about where do you buy land? Where do you live? That thing is such an obsessive thing for Kenyans. I don't understand it myself. It is easier to buy land in Tanga or in Jinja or in Arusha
As many has said, and I like that. And maybe we need to also, especially in and when I'm coming to, especially when it comes to intermarriages, and Reverend, you just alluded to it. Maybe it needs to be introduced in premarital, or when you're talking to couples, that expectation of culture. And when this happened, this is what you expected. Are you okay with it, or you're not okay with it? When have you got that kind of client who was coming and they're actually, yes, they're grieving, but they're shocked that they had to do this because their in-laws made them do this? Then you're laughing. I think you've had. Have you got that kind of a client? What happens? I mean, what was the shock? Can you just brief us? I mean, as the Reverend has said, you have long hair and you're told, or.
I'm laughing because I've been teaching premarital for close to 20 years now. And in my humble opinion, I submit to you that every marriage is intercultural, because men grieve differently and women grieve differently. So already every marriage starts on intercultural understanding the differences between the men and women. Now, when you throw in our cultural heritage, Aluya man, a Kisii woman, now the conversation becomes more and more complex. And then you throw in Nairobian children, Mombasa children, who are in an international school. So here is the thing. And I think I usually tend to just think it's God's sense of humor, that we are holding on and saying, my culture, my culture, my culture. But that culture you're insisting on is your culture, is like a quarter of who you are. If your blood was to be pricked, you're like 10% only of that culture that you're pushing, or that culture that you're rejecting. In other words, we need to begin to realize that grief is grief. It takes no color or shape. it takes different forms in different people, and we are different people regardless of our race, color, or creed. Yeah. And so once we start from that posture, we actually start from a posture of don't judge it. Don't judge, remove judgment from the table, and also remove disrespect from the table. Because the same way I am judging theirs, I can also be judged. You know, why are you crying so loudly? And you're looking at me and wondering, why are you not crying at all? You know, so if we approach the different cultural engagements from a place of lack of judgment and from a place of mutual respect. And you see, respect is saying, I really don't understand why, but I respect that you must have a reason why you do that. But then thirdly, I also implore us to approach it from a place of curiosity. And curiosity for me was very interesting to see the symbolism of the Luo culture in the many ways that it was brought to the fore for many of us to understand Luo culture in the death of Baba. You know, so what that means is that it allows you to look at every time you're entering into that space as a learning experience. One of the times that I really learned a lot about these cultural differences was when I served as a pastor. And you know, you're going to funerals every weekend. I'll be honest with you, Pastor Ondachi. Where I come from, you either eat after the funeral or before the funeral. Now, I go to this part of the country and you're being asked, please, let's go and eat. And I'm thinking, no, we shouldn't be eating. There's someone, you know. But apparently it is the cultural practice. And I remember just wondering, Aki, am I allowed to eat? But you know, in fact, the person that I was with was made me learn that if I do not go to eat, because I am in that funeral, in my capacity as pastor, if I do not go to eat, nobody else can go to eat. So, you know, you begin to understand, oh, that's the implication, you know, and I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. So some of these things you don't learn, and we don't learn. You know, there's a saying that says, if you only eat in your mother's house, you'll think your mother is the best cook. But then tembea, not just your mother being the best cook. I mean, tembea, learn how other people do it. Because even if you're married to someone from your culture, unless you live in a cocoon in the Kenya of today, you cannot be the only ones that your neighbors, your friends, your churchmates, your colleagues cannot only always be from your cultural inclination. If you do not have people around you that are of the outside culture, the beauty of the internet is now we all have a better understanding of Luo culture. Haya wanafanyanga hivyo, you know. So allow yourself to be open and to learn from the people next to you.
Wow, that's deep. Now, as we talk of culture, there's a new culture that has just come in, and it's the WhatsApp fundraising contributions. There was a comment that was going around on social media saying when the late Betty Bao was actually being taken to hospital, there was no one to remove money. I don't know that it's true or not. I'm just saying, they're saying that there was no one to remove money for her when she was in hospital, when she was moved in between hospital. But now, when you die, there's contributions. WhatsApp groups have been opened and contributions and people actually removing. Is that collective pain? Is that collective pain, or should collective pain be at a point where I'm in hospital, I'm not feeling well, can we contribute? But you find that people remove more money when somebody has died than when somebody is in hospital. Reverend Onachi, what is your take on that?
My take on that, Mweni, is that, again, in terms of cultures, there are different cultures around the world. There are about 4 big ones, 3, 4 really big ones in terms of national cultures, perhaps continental cultures. The continental culture of the Northern Hemisphere, the Americas, and the Canadians and the whites, let me say that, is a very futuristic culture. They are very intense about discovering the future, what is on the moon, what is behind the moon, what's on the universe, a lot of invention. It's a deep curiosity. The culture of the Middle East is very present culture. It's very much now. It's big on hospitality. The first 8-star hotel came up in Dubai because the Middle Easterns are very big on present feeling. The African culture is very past oriented. That's where I'm coming to. For us, our culture, our heritage, our history, our past is very important. To Africans, in general, the dead don't die. They are very much alive. You can be cursed by your grandfather who died in 1970. You can be disciplined using his name. Like, who do you think you are? Your ancestors would not approve of what you're doing, this behavior you have. And that's very real to us. So we have a certain respect for the dead that other cultures don't have. When we talk about Betty Bayo, she is not dead. It's like we talk of her like she's here. And we have a respect and an honor for that. So that you discover, it didn't just start with Betty. For us, you can suffer and really struggle and nobody will give you anything. But when you die, all your quote unquote sins and mistakes are forgotten. And that time you've become a respected person at that time. And therefore people rally around. It is collective culturally in the way that the culture views death. Africans do not disrespect death. We don't. We have a very, very, very high value and opinion. When you read history, and you discover that David Livingstone left the UK, came to Africa to preach the gospel, he carried his clothes in a coffin and told people goodbye. I may encounter malaria, and wherever I am, bury me there. The culture rolls with it. An African will find that very difficult to wrap around their head. Kenyans are still troubled about the teacher, the school teacher who died in Tanzania. We don't know where his body is. We want to have such respect of that body that we want to see him. We want to bury him. And the Muzungus, some Muzungu friends of mine were wondering, what is this obsession you have with a person who's dead? He's dead, he's dead. What's the issue? And the Africans are in shock. How can you be so disrespectful to speak like that about a dead person? And so for Betty, I take it like one, if we're to speak about Betty specifically, and also to go to the Honorable Raila Odinga specifically, here is where our population is shortchanged when it comes to our celebrities. They don't share with us their struggle. We don't know what's happening in terms of their health. And if information going around serves me right, I think I read somewhere that they were trying to, as much as possible, keep Betty Bayo's sickness out of the public. And so partly it's shock, Roslyn, because all of us were shocked. Raila Odinga dead. And I remember I asked in my Facebook post, why is there so much secrecy about Baba if he's sick?
Yeah.
Why don't you help us, prepare us to anticipate, to know what to do? So that the shock that comes with our celebrities dying, sometimes, honestly, it is unfair to the public. It would be important for us to understand that our celebrity is very sick. She is struggling with such and such. If someone had told us that Raila was struggling with this number of ailments, I think the public outcry would have been, please do not give us a punishing schedule. Allow Baba to rest. During the first Gen Z riots in 2024 June, there's a young girl who told Raila Odinga, please stay at home. Let us run the streets.
I remember that. Yeah.
We want to respect our celebrities that way, but when you keep hiding from us what you're struggling with, then you leave us with very little to work with. So that now when we hear you have died, we wonder, we would have wanted to do something, but you didn't give us the opportunity to do it. And for that, I'm with the public when they say, okay, we didn't know what was happening, but perhaps if our fan base knew that, they would have helped. But we are not given that information. That would be my take on it.
And I'm wondering, I'm just curious, don't you think we need to move away from that? Because it's very expensive. Don't you think we need to move away from that fear of the death and just someone dies and we bury them? Same day, bury, cremate same day, and go home, have a cup of tea, and maybe mourn, and then instead of taking the person for the whole week, don't you think we need to move away from staying so long and mourning and contributing so much money and eating so much and being elaborate? I mean,
Maybe
I don't know.
let me just be brief and say in just shortly, because I think Mweni will have a lot to say about this. Mweni is very fresh with her books that are about to be launched. So this information is very fresh on her mind. I am a very big advocate for culture. And I would say, let culture be itself. That would be my take. I think there's a time we were burying one of my uncles from my wife's side. And I remember we ran into a serious tongue lashing from an elder because people from Nairobi, we were back at home, were saying, hurry up the speeches because we need to return to Nairobi. Amze stood up there and said, my brother has died. If you have to rush, then just go where you're going. But we are going to honor him, and we're going to talk for as long as we need to talk because we are going to mourn him. They said nobody else has died. He's the only person who has died, and he's the only person we are burying in this season. Allow us to mourn him properly. And if your time is so much pressing on you because somebody has sent him a note and they told him that it's about to rain, the Nairobi people need to leave, would you please bury quickly? Now, that made sense for Nairobi people who need to rush to their cars. They don't want to drive in the rain. They're scared of the rain and they're scared to dirtify their clothes and everything else. But honestly, it came out as extremely rude and insensitive to say, bury him already. But this is my brother. He's an elder in our village. Nobody in this village is rushing anywhere. We are not. We are here to respect this person who meant so much to us. For you who didn't mean much to you, just leave. That's what he said. And you know, so this comment, I hear it from people from other continental cultures, like the whites, and I'm empathetic and sympathetic with them because it's opportunity now to educate them on how Africans think. We think very, very historically. My great-great-grandfather is very important to me. And that rooting really matters to me. We have family, children who are named after the same people. And so I am not the only Edward in our family. If you ask all the Edwards to stand up, because we are named after my mother's father, like 15 people are going to stand up. That means something for us. And so you can't name somebody Smith because you think the name is sexy to name somebody that way. You are named after someone. You are named. That behavior that you have is after someone in your history, and that then matters. We see family differently. So I'm not one to rush to overhaul how our culture behaves, but like you said, Rosalind, the Gen Z are their own culture. And you realize there are culture that has grown up in the city, and you cannot change their behavior quickly because culture takes a long time to form, and it's very difficult to overhaul it. So I'm not one to quickly ask that we transform this, because then we're changing into what? And sometimes when you say move away from this, what we are saying is that we should be more civilized, and we should behave more like white people who have their own culture. And there's a reason why they behave that way. And you can't become a culture in a vacuum. You can't create something of yourself. So we have to ask ourselves, stop this and move into what?
Yeah, I hear you.
That's
When
my
do you want
take.
to delve into that?
When you have,
And make sure you've put that culture in your books. You're launching 2 books. Congratulations. Maybe you want to delve into
Thank
that.
you.
Who launches 2 books? Only money.
imagine, that's crazy.
So
don't know
culture is very important in grief. I like the way Rev puts it. And I like the fact that he acknowledges, and that's the thing. And it goes back to when we received Christianity, because for many of us, it was we received Christianity and it made everything that was African bad. And
Yes.
that continues to be a complex conversation within church today. And I like there's an elder, I'm trying to I can't remember his name for now, but he says that we must be able to differentiate what is cultural that has implications that we should actually look into, and what is culture, what are other cultural practices that are neutral, like I like mokimo. Mokimo is a cultural food for a certain community. It is neither good or bad. It is just that. So we need to be able to have these conversations within our cultural understanding. But that's a conversation that I think that's a whole conversation about many things in culture. But when it comes to grief, culture is important because one, it shapes how we express grief. It also shapes what we express, because there are some griefs that are not expressed. It actually defines what we express. It also defines what meaning do we attach to loss. So meaning making is a big part of culture. It also defines the community that supports us, who supports us in our periods of loss. Who stands with you. It also guides it also gives us the rituals that guide us. For a person of this stage, and I know that this is like Rebbe said, we've experienced this when we go to Bari. You'll always find that they're saying, this was a community elder. A community elder cannot be put in the ground before 6 p.m. And that's okay. And then it also defines how long we are supposed to stay put and grieve. For many cultures, by the way, you'll notice that many people talk about 40 days. We have other people that have 40 days or 6 weeks, and then you have practices that say, we'll do this. After 6 weeks, we come back and do that. There's a rhythm as to how Africans do their thing and their style and everything. And then there's how culture also, because we also, you cannot be, how are you explained? If you're this expression, if you're crying louder than the bereaved, why? How? You know, so all these things, culture defines it. And when you go outside of those things that are culturally understood, then it is a marker too. Is there a problem? Is there a problem with this person? Is this natural? Is this normal? And again, remember that normal is a very subjective statement. So when we look at normal, what may be normal within one culture may not be normal within another culture. Again, calling us to understanding, and a place of understanding, not just knowledge, but understanding.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Yeah, it's very normal for the people from Western Nyanza to have disco matanga. It is not normal from the people of Central to have disco matanga. Yeah. During in the Western, when there's a death, there's activity in that household, that home, for many weeks. Many weeks, there's a lot of activity. Now, I'd like us to jump into domestic workers that go to, these countries of Saudi Arabia, Qatar. There's a lot of either there's slavery, they're put into slavery. There's also death. They die by suicide. The stories we've heard and read are not very well. They're very sad. And for me, I think that we should have collective pain when you're talking about that. What I'm trying to understand and trying to articulate and being curious about is what is the church, Reverend Ondachi, maybe you as a church leader, trying to do to assist these families that have children who have either died or they are stuck in these countries. Because I feel like where I'm sitting, the government, I don't know if the government is doing a lot, but I'm not seeing a lot of what. So how can you sensitize families to be careful, to make sure they register with the right people, employment bureaus, and also sensitize the people who are going on what to do? How can we assist that? Because I think that is a very sad thing, and it has to be a nation collective pain.
I'm breathing in because it's such a. I have observed our governments closely, from the Moi government to the Kibaki administration, to the Uhuru Kenyatta administration, and now to the William Ruto administration. And this issue of of Kenyans dying abroad at the hands of as domestic workers, I've only seen it a lot more in the last administration and this one. I could be wrong, but I think it has most been felt in this current administration. In my view, as a church leader, and I think you've had church leaders really come out to call out our present government on this. It is essentially a failure of leadership and a very weak foreign policy. Like we said last week, when somebody dies abroad, when a national leader dies, it is expected that the government will be the first one to lead us and permit us in that session of mourning. You set the tone to allow people to mourn. And we will feel better when we know that our Foreign Affairs Office is upset. You see, that would be enough to see that the cabinet secretary in charge of Foreign Affairs docket is very, very annoyed. When Honorable Musalia Mudavadi went and petitioned for the Kenyans to be released from the Uganda fridge, there was a sense that he wasn't annoyed enough. And you see that adds to grief, because after weeks and weeks, people have been making so much noise for 38 days for Kenyans who are in a Uganda jail. There was a feeling that the government is not doing enough. And I remember watching on television, and the families, the mothers to these boys are appealing. They are crying. They are saying, help us to understand whether our children are dead or alive. That guts you when you see that, because you feel the pain of that mother who is not aware whether is my son alive or dead. When the issues of domestic workers in Arabic countries are jumping from 8th floors and 9th floors, and they are tortured and they are enslaved, what I ask myself, what is our foreign affairs office doing? Because they need to be the ones who sometimes to see that somebody is annoyed enough is healing for you, because you feel that the lives of our brothers and sisters abroad are being looked at by this office. But when there is a sense of our government may even be in collision with the Tanzanian government in the issue of Boniface Mwangi, you wonder, we were being told things there, Boniface was saying, that we wondered whether our government was supporting them. It's terrible to hear such things, because then you don't feel safe. And I think that the church has really done a lot in calling out these last two governments, in saying you need to do your job, you need to help us. You see, when someone is abroad now, it's not as if someone is in Migori, because during the 2007-2008 post-election violence, the church organized Msafara, where people went in cars and they went to fetch people in churches in Eldoret and places like that. We can move freely in our own country and say we'll go fetch those people if they come. If you hear that a domestic worker is being abused in Kisii, and that domestic worker is from the coast, the church can easily rally people to go there and get that domestic worker to come. But when this is happening abroad, it's very frustrating, because the rules are different. We can't get into planes and go to to Saudi Arabia to get our sisters to come. But for me, specifically for this government, my disappointment is that from the Foreign Affairs Office, they are the very ones who sent these people abroad to look for these jobs. So for me, that's why I call it a failure of leadership, because it's such an opposite view from the Kibaki government called people who are abroad to come home and help us to build our country. This government is sending people away to go and work as cooks, as watchmen, as house helps. We're the ones who are sending them there in the terms of creating jobs. Now, I have a degree in leadership, and I'm looking at this and I'm so puzzled about which area of leadership allows you to do such a lousy thing. To be able to send people out there to say we are creating employment by sending domestic workers abroad, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see that as an interpretation to say this is creating employment for our people. That is not it. Our people, we know. I think I've been a Kenyan for 56 years. I have a good understanding of the fact that Kenyans are proud of their nation. They want their nation to call them home. All the people like abroad and working abroad are not there because they enjoy to do this. Kenyans would really love an opportunity to come back home. And so we shouldn't be in a position where we are sending people out. We should be in a place where we are calling people to come back home. And this issue really triggers me out, because I feel terrible to think that someone who's just going out trying to look for greener pastures for their family. And of course, they are living for various reasons. There's a lot of poverty and struggle at home. At the very least, if they are living at the behest and sending of our own government, then we should be able to follow up about the well-being of our people. We should be able to complete the cycle and not send people abroad and not know where they are. We should have a foreign office that is very strong voiced in being able to say we need to know that the lives of our citizens are safe. And our healing will start when we know that our foreign minister is very, very upset about this and does not need us to push him up to the last minute after 38 days. That's when he's writing a letter. For me, Rosalind, I find that extremely disappointing.
That's very interesting. That is, I'm just trying to. I don't know if you saw also when this lady came from Saudi, Rema now reached in a wheelchair. I don't know if you saw that on the news. Mwani, to you, I'm just trying to imagine what the mother or the sister or the people who helped her go what were they thinking? Like maybe I encouraged her to leave. We raise money for her to go, and we are actually sending them to die. We are only sending them to suffer because they send them genuinely, but now you're coming back, your child is coming back a shell of themselves. So how can you give voice to these painful feelings for families and friends and parents of these people who have gone?
One of the things we must realize is that when people die abroad, whether they have gone for work or they actually relocated and by saying for work, I'm looking about the like the house helps going to work in Saudi Arabia, or whether they have literally relocated, like now the families that people live, they live outside of the country. In whatever situation, distance always complicates grief. Why? Because there's delayed information, there's fragmented details, and oftentimes there's lack of closure. Because we are trying to understand exactly what happened. Did my child say something before they died? Those are things that are really important. And so when we are not getting these things, they actually become contributors to complicated grief. Because there's so many unanswered questions. They become contributors to prolonged grief because there's so much uncertainty that it slows down the progression of the grief journey. And so and then the uncertainty also just intensifies distress because there are conflicting in reports, there's delays in communication, and truth is there is often a fear that there's something that is being withheld. And what is it that we are not being told? Now, remember that also in the death of a loved one, physical presence is important. It's important to be able to know, what, they died in hospital XYZ. Because when we go there, there's a sense of unfinished goodbye. I saw this person physically, last time I saw them was 5 years ago. So now you're bringing me up, you're telling me that you don't know how they died. They were discovered in their house. It is such a challenge for families because, yes, you're right, Rosalind, it brings about feelings of guilt, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of helplessness, and a persistent what if. A myriad of coulda, would have done questions. And then here is another reality that we must acknowledge: the financial dimension of that loss. The person who has died was probably the breadwinner. The person who has died was supported the family. They're the ones that were paying fees. They were the tegemeo for that family. So now, not only is it a loss in terms of the relationship, but there's also a security, economic, financial security loss. And so that now brings about stress-related conditions because now who's going to help us bring these bills? And finally, we must also acknowledge the cost of bringing that body home. The cost of bringing that body home. It is such a high cost to raise funds to bring the body home, to be able to handle the remains, to be able to perform rituals that are familiar, rituals that give us a sense of closure, rituals that give us a sense of belonging, rituals that give us a sense of communal grief. Now, when the body is not here, when we are being told we don't know when the body will come, remember that as long as someone has died, and you're still fundraising to bring the body home, even if it takes you 3 months, that grief is not going to move for 3 months. You're going to be stuck there. The day that body arrives at the airport, you're going to break down as though the death happened yesterday because you have been stuck. There's a way that the grief needs to move forward. So all these things are very, very complex. And for me, I like what Rev said about having studied leadership, but I just wish that we would also now begin to have people-centered systems and structures. Structures and systems that, whether it is healthcare, whether it is leadership, whether it is education, whether it is even churches, the irony of saying that about churches is that these are systems that will prioritize the needs, the values, the dignity, and the voices of people at the core of their design and function. Remember, and this is even with churches, and I say this because we've had our own experiences with different church organizations or even parachurch organizations. Here is the thing. As at the core of church and the functioning of church, we should never take away the things that Christ died for at the cross. We should never take away people's dignity. We should never take away the voice of people. We should never take away responsiveness. We should never take away all the things that Christ died for us on the cross and take them away from the people that we are leading. So even, I think it should be very straightforward in many ways that if you're moving from Kenya through an organization that is recruiting for people in country XYZ, see, that list can be sent to the embassy, and just find out where are you working, who are you working for, where because every time, because this is very interesting, when we hear of leaders having gone abroad, we hear they met the Kenyan community there. So who is the Kenyan community there? Who brings these people together? And there needs to be a sense of that, and that is government responsibility, and that is why, as a Kenyan taxpayer, we actually fund this agency, these embassies. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to help Kenyans who are abroad. Now, there are many difficult, complex conversations that we need to have about Kenyans working abroad, because there are those that are accorded, when they die abroad, they are accorded everything that we desire we had. And are they children of a lesser God? Are they children of a lesser God? We may have many things to say about the UN, and that's not the conversation tonight. But I want to pick a principle I learned about the UN. In the United Nations, when you die at the forefront in let's say, the way they go for a peacekeeping mission. When you're on a peacekeeping mission, whether you're the head of the mission, or you're the cook in the mission, or you're the guy who's the techie in the mission, when you die in the mission, your family gets the same amount of compensation because you died on mission. It doesn't matter what level you are in. The fact that you died on the mission serving under the UN, you're accorded the same kind of dignity. And I think that should be the bare minimum that we should offer Kenyans.
Wow. And when you talk about abroad, I do a lot of therapy counseling with students staying abroad. And also the number of young students who have died by suicide seems to be increasing. Yeah. And that is quite painful even for the I can't imagine when as a mother. So I don't know if you want to maybe speak on that, maybe encourage parents or caregivers. And any of you can jump into that, because I've just remembered they're abroad, and I'm seeing a lot of children dying by suicide or overdose of drugs, and they're abroad. Yeah.
I think there was a team from Nairobi Chapel, and I was enjoined on that team that about 2 years ago, and very proud to say this, formed a team to entreat Parliament to decriminalize suicide. And I'm so proud to say that Parliament finally passed it. But before that, and even as a culture, we may have passed it as a law, but as a culture, we are still struggling with where to place death by suicide. And I think last week, I think it is Mweni who mentioned even the wording of it, death by suicide, has an effect on how we view this death. But the idea generally is to feel embarrassed and to hide the fact that the person has died by suicide. The last funeral I did where there was a death by suicide, the family did not want me to say it from the pulpit that it was a death by suicide, chiefly because a death by suicide is ultimately blamed on the family. And in truth, it does not have to be the family's fault. A death by suicide can be out of depression, and it is ultimately by choice of individual. And so I remember in this particular funeral, I told the parents that this is not your fault. And I remember just allowing for that thought to sink in. And the family was so grateful to hear from the pulpit, the pastor telling them, don't blame yourself for this. Ultimately, at a certain point, all of us have to take responsibility for our lives. If somebody gets depressed in your home, it does not mean that it is your fault. It's not a commentary necessarily on your parenting. Depression can be for such a varied amount of reasons, a lot of which can be just some chemical imbalance in a person's life. And a lot of people who die by suicide have been known to go and tell family goodbye, hug father and mother, and ultimately go ahead and commit suicide. And the thing that is important to understand as we begin to, I think it was a very important petition to move Parliament to decriminalize suicide. Now the culture needs to start to educate itself to exactly what happens when a person decides to take their life by suicide, and to normalize the fact that it really happens, and it can really happen. It can happen to Christian families. It can happen to Bible study and praying families. It can happen to any family and any tribe and any culture. It can really happen to you. A large part of what we are suffering from is the cultural construct that believes it is demonic for it to happen. Now, to extract that thought from many Africans is very difficult. And last week we said that even if a person dies by suicide, you'll discover either they are buried at night or the church refuses to touch them, because then there are even questions on. I've been asked the question that if somebody dies by suicide, do they go to heaven? This is how deep that thought is that we consider it not only a crime, we also consider it a sin against God. Now, when you get there, you are sending a lot of fear. I think what the church can do is to be able to speak on this topic from the pulpit, and to be able to empathize with families, and to be able to teach on it, and to be able to bring in counseling psychologists, and to bring grief experts like Mweni. I think the amount of information that Mweni is giving us here is so important for churches. It's such an important teaching place. And I think Mweni, your book is so timely. Your books are so timely in being able to help. These books need to be in pastors' hands to help us to be able to educate families as we comfort them, to allow them to be able to share this. Believe it or not, during COVID, there were families that were even telling me, don't say dad died of COVID. Just say it was pneumonia. It was because COVID was viewed as an embarrassing way to die. I don't know how it's like COVID downplayed the dignity of the person in dying. I don't understand why, but there are families who did not want the death to be associated with COVID, the same way that people did not want a death to be associated with HIV/AIDS. You feel as though HIV was a stigma. You don't want that. And yet, like you're saying, Rosalind, death is death. The person is dead. The grief is no different irrespective of how the person died. And so we have a lot to educate our culture about. Now, there are suicides that are by, the suicide note said this, and now that's a big deal, because the person committing suicide can say it is because of you. Now that's another level. And that is why I like the fact that it has been decriminalized, allows us to be able to go into the specifics of that suicide. It helps us to know how to condole with the families. I know of one case of a provost who woke up in the morning and found his wife hanging in his own sitting room. And she had been telling him for weeks and months that I'm going to do this. And finally, he told her, do it. And she...
He is frozen. He is frozen. Can you hear him? Winnie, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't
We've
hear
lost
him, I
him.
think.
We've lost him. Maybe you can jump in, as maybe he's, especially on the point of where a note is being left and you're being blamed. This person has blamed that you are the reason why I'm doing this. I mean, as a grief, how would you handle that kind of a plan?
Notes are complex. Notes are very complex because I know of cases where even the police do not release the note to the family. In terms of, if we release this note to the family in this instance, they will not be able to manage what the note says. And so sometimes I know police have taken the note and released it to the family at a much later stage. And by family here is they may release the note to instead of releasing the note to the parent, because sometimes some notes are written from a posture of pain and they say, Mom, it is your fault. So in that instance, I know that, and we actually do have trauma-informed police. The problem is that there's such a small number. Such a small number compared to all the incidences that the police handle. But so they would take, I know of police who've taken a note, held on to it and released it maybe to the minister, released it to a close relative who can be able to help the family process what is in that note. Because remember that because of the nature in which people who die by suicide take their life, die. Remember that there's all these things, that all these other emotions that come. There's guilt, there's shame, there's anger, there's all this wanting to know why, or wanting to blame the fault on somebody else. And so it's very complex. It's very, very complex. But here's the thing that the Word of God always reminds us: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So how we treat somebody who has lost a loved one through suicide, how would I want to be treated if my loved one died by suicide? Because I can only talk about myself. I cannot sit here and say that my so and so will never die. No one in my family will ever die by suicide. I can't say that. I cannot say that with any surety. Yeah. So how would I want to be treated? Because the barometer, actually, when you use that as a barometer, we actually get to know the God and the Lord that you believe in. They will know we are Christians by our love. And finally, on suicide, is the shame we attach is in the way the person died. Now, remember, sometimes when people want to know how did they die, is we want to know, did they die by suicide? So that we can decide how we will respond to your grief. If they died by suicide, we'll respond with lack of empathy and judgment. But if they died in a carjacking incident, we will feel woye. You know, that shouldn't be. Because grief is grief. I mean, and I'm not being insensitive, but would you miss your loved one more if they died in a car accident as opposed to if they died of suicide? It doesn't matter. You don't miss them because they died of suicide or because they died in a car accident. We miss them because they died, period. It's like saying, if and this is to not be insensitive at all. If I died and I was hit by a Mercedes, is my death more dignified than if I died because I fell off a Buddha? You know, I mean, ultimately, we grieve because you died, not how you died. Now, the how you died may complicate the grief, but it does not negate the grief.
Yeah, I like that. And the pain, by the time a person actually decides to die by suicide, the pain that person has gone through from that is the grief part. That pain, that the decision to actually do that and end your life. That individual has gone through a lot of pain, a lot of thought, a lot of soul searching to reach there. There's a lot. There's a lot that you have gone through. I'm just bringing in this word that many Christians like saying, "It is well." It's like a collective-ish pain. It is well. God will comfort you. I mean, how can church make space for honest lamenting while still holding on to that hope? Because most Christians will come and tell you it is well. Yeah, it is well. I mean, is it well for the person who has lost a loved one? And why do they say that? Maybe I don't know.
You know, when you said something so important when we were starting, when he said we should not try and be God's, what did you call it? PA team?
God's PR agency.
God's PR agency.
Yeah.
We do that when we are trying to play God. And I've had people who are saying, don't tell me it's okay. It is not. I've even had people who are saying, don't quote for me scriptures. And some of them, they say, I know the Bible. Don't tell me. I don't want people who will come here quoting the Bible. And I have found that a lot of times that's grief talking, but often it's because they feel like we are trying to manage them, to handle them. People don't like to feel like they are being handled. People like to feel like they are being empathized with. And it's important sometimes. The most important thing I have told grieving teams at Mashakayas, to say nothing is okay. To be unable to speak is okay. To don't feel as if you have to rush to fill in the voids and the vacuumed places. Don't feel as though you have come with a very special message from heaven. Don't come armed with to the teeth with scriptures, because a lot of times it does not help. At that point, we are all puzzled. At that point, we are all grieving. At that point, we are all hit badly. I have been moved in Nairobi Chapel a lot of times to see the senior pastor breaking down at a funeral of a child, breaking down on the pulpit and to say, I do not know what to tell you. I have no idea what to say. I am so broken at this point in time. And I have seen that healing families because of that honest moment when death equalizes all of us. That is the truth. And the examples you're giving are so critical, whether it's a Boda or a bus or a Mercedes-Benz or whatever it is. Death is death. And at that point in time, we are all hit by the same wave of sadness. And yes, somebody has got to be able to make decisions. Somebody has got to be able to lead. But at the human level, all of us are hit hard at that point. And I try to tell myself and to tell pastors, fellow pastors, this is not a time to be clever. This is a time to empathize with the family. And I have learned this a lot in just sitting with families and asking them, what do you need? And they say nothing. I just need you to be here. I just need you to be here because I'm so numb right now. I am so cold right now. I'm in so much shock right now. And I think what grieving families feel terrible about is when they sense that we are just saying that. So Rosalind, when you say you're telling people it will be well, we are trying to handle that person, to tell them it is well, so that we feel better, not so that they feel better. And you're just saying that as a statement. When I lost my mom in a very tragic road accident. And for us, it was many years ago, 30 years ago. It's like it happened yesterday. And I remember my world stopped. I was 25 years old. And this is the first major tragedy happening in our home. And our world stopped. But I was shocked to realize that my friends' worlds did not stop. I was thinking that everybody is in such deep mourning. And for the time that my friends were with us in the house, they were very empathetic and sad. They looked very sad and broken. And at that point, when they were unable to speak, when they were unable to know what to say, I felt comforted. Until the formal meeting finished, and we were huddling together as a family. And just outside my bedroom, my friends were not aware that I could hear them talking. They were cracking jokes. They in fact, they were planning. They were saying, now that we've finished this part over here, they were actually planning a trip. And they had a trip that my mother's death had not stopped it. And I have not forgotten it in 30 years that their lives were going on. And I felt like by the way, like a coma in their lives. Like we are here. One of them was telling the other one, go and call so and so and tell them we just stopped by here briefly, but we are still coming. And they were heading for a trip in Nanyuki. I promise you that added to my grief and disappointment. Because important as my mother was to me, she was not to them. And it is important to realize that when we go to condole with families, they don't want information in our head. They want our heart to empathize with them. And there is a way to tell someone, I was on a trip and I am so deeply, deeply saddened by what has happened to you. And please allow me to continue. Families do understand that. And it is the way we say it. It's a posturing of our hearts, how we position ourselves, that means a lot to families. The thing they do not want is to feel as though we are acting. And a lot of times, you're right, Rosalind, we are acting around the scriptures. And that just adds to their grief. We are saying words that are not coming from our hearts. And so you can say it's okay and it looks like you mean it. But I think a grieving person can tell that you're just saying that. That is lip service that you are giving to me. And I think, again, when you borrow from our cultures then demanded that if you go to a home where someone has died, you say nothing, sit there with them until the person is buried. You suspend absolutely everything you are doing and sit there until the person is buried. That's what our cultures demanded. And when you see that, and that's why I'm reluctant to slow that down, because when people come and they say, bury him quickly because we have a flight to catch, it's very insensitive to that kind of thing. It's extremely insensitive. And it's better you don't say anything. And the people in the home will tell you, I know you have a job to do. I know that you have children to go home and take care of. We can release you to go. Families would often do that. But they do not want to feel like those words look like they are clever words you read in a book and you're quoting them to me for your own sake, not mine. And that thing feels very, very bad. So you're right. When you say it's gonna be okay, people will often see through that hypocrisy and say, you don't really mean it. I know you're saying what any other Christian would say, and it sounds light. It sounds very unnatural. Yeah.
And I agree with you, because I also, when I visit like a mashakaya or a place, I personally don't know what to say. So those people just sit and keep quiet.
Yeah.
Then what I'm curious is Mwani, is what can you advise people in terms of, they come in and they want to hear the story. So what happened? And the grieved family seems to be telling the story over and over. And you're being polite, so you want to tell the story. Oh, he was driving, or she was driving this, and it happened. Another person comes in and says, is there a decorum when it comes to? I'm just wondering, is that decorum? What is the expectation? Ama you just flow with? Because me, I just keep quiet. When I enter, so I just sit and keep quiet.
There's decorum.
That's a very lovely thing to do.
And the first thing that I would say is, remember what I said about whether you died in a Boda or a Mercedes? The point is, why did you come because of how they died, or did you come because they died? You came to sit with me because my loved one has died. How they died, it should not influence the quality of sitting that you come to do with me. So this curiosity of, how did they die? Give me the details. Why should it matter? And then also, remember that there are people who we were not that close. So I'm not going to give you the details of how the person died. And sorry about that. Yeah. So sometimes people are driven by curiosity than empathy. Now, there is no rule of thumb. However, ultimately, people heal better when their grief is witnessed. How does witnessing grief look like? It means I see your pain. I validate your experience, and I offer presence, not pressure. And I am coming to not minimize or rush the process. I am coming to sit with you, because, by the way, even when we go back to the Bible, there was no pressure on we need your grief to move along. No. And essentially what we are talking about, especially the whole phrase, it is well. I even know people even today can no longer sing that hymn because it just takes them back to a very dark place. But here is the thing. We have become so good. Unfortunately, this is an indictment to the church. We have become very good at spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is where we do not allow people to sit with the pain, where we are actually telling people, move along, where we are not allowing people to name what they are going through, where we are not allowing people, where we are making a shield instead of making it be a posture. So when we say it is well, we are saying, don't bring your grief to the table. Your grief is too intense. Now, that's where we make your faith a shield. But when we say, it is well in that it may, remember that we are also a people of faith, but we can say it is well in that, imagine your grief does not negate your faith, and your faith does not negate your grief. Those two truths can sit together. My grief should not threaten my faith. And how do we see that? We see it in the Bible in different ways. When Jesus went and Lazarus had died, what did he do? He didn't say it is well. You know, he offered the biblical model of holding pain and faith together. Jesus wept, but also he said, I am the resurrection. And they didn't understand because they were like, if you were here, he would not have died. But he was like, I am the resurrection, and then goes ahead. Now, the pressure for pastors to say something so profound, so tweetable, is unnecessary.
It's unnecessary.
What can you say in the midst of a deep tragedy that will make things okay? You're giving yourself unnecessary pressure, but you're also giving yourself an impossible task. It's not necessary for you to look for a tweet-worthy sermon. When Job lost his everything, Job didn't hide his pain from God. He named it fully, and yet held on to God. He says, though you slay me, yet will I praise your name. So we can hold both. They're not, your grief and your faith are not in competition. They're not in competition. And so there's no need for you to deny your reality. And that's a place for lament, because lament allows us to be emotionally honest, but also to find a spiritual anchor. And even David, we see that in David. In fact, one of the characters that allows me to see emotions at work and at play in the Bible is David. David was in many ways allowed us to see emotional transparency. He says I think it's Psalms chapter 6 and verse 6, he says, I am worn out from my groaning. All night long, I flood my bed with weeping. I mean, so there's no spiritual bypassing there. He doesn't gloss over his pain. He names his sorrow, but he still anchors his faith on God. He says, he goes on to say, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of God. He goes on to say things like, hope in God, for yet will I praise him. Yet, this is the same person who in emotional honesty has says, my tears have been my food day and night. So he allows us to see the full range of grief fully expressed, but also spiritually anchored. And that's what we need to be able to see, and that's what we need to be able to create safe spaces for people in the congregation. And true, here is the thing. I like what you are talking about, the senior pastor breaking down and crying in the death of a child. And I remember that incident very well, because I believe it was the incident where a child died when they had gone for ropes camp. Yeah. He shows up both as a minister, but he also shows up as a parent. Exactly. The two are not in competition. The two are not in competition. And guess what? As a leader, you give your vulnerability, gives the congregation permission to own their vulnerability. It's the same thing we said about parents a few weeks ago. If as a parent, you are allowing your children to see your vulnerability in the space of grief, your children are also going to be okay with their own vulnerability. But if as a parent you decide we don't cry, your children will now, not only will they be feeling grief, but they will also be feeling shame attached to it. So everything rises and falls with leadership, even in grief.
Wow. That is profound.
Absolutely.
Yeah, profound. Yeah. As we finish, maybe I'd like Moni to have the last word, because she's going to tell us a little bit more about her books and her book launch.
Yes.
Reverend Ondachi, maybe you can just give us a parting shot and just a summary of the 3 weeks that we've been meeting. Your thoughts on that? Yeah.
I really have learned so much talking about this. I have healed by talking. You've given me a deep appreciation of the different cultures within our nation, and I feel burdened to be an educator, to help our people to be more literate in grief. The death of the Honorable Raila Odinga has opened up a conversation that I hope we can now carry on to be able to help us to appreciate, not suspect each other, to be able to realize that our cultures are God-given and we should not be struggling to change them. We should be embracing them and accepting them as part and parcel of our national fabric. I think my key word, my take-home word today is the word grief illiterate. We need not to judge each other. We need to educate each other and then appreciate each other. Let me finish with a very short story. I was in New Zealand years ago, and a friend of mine told me that they have a death in the family. His grandfather was very sick. And so I didn't ask many questions, but I felt like maybe as a pastor, I should accompany him to be able to go to the family. And he told me he's very, very ill. And so we went. And when we arrived at the family, I had mourning. Everybody was dressed in black. And I thought, you told me he's sick. And he said, yes. But I said, why is everyone rolling on the ground, throwing dust everywhere? And we walked to the compound, and there was this old man alive. And people were weeping and telling him thank you and stories. And they were like, wow. They were just pouring lament out. And the old man is there and is listening to people telling him some stories of deep appreciation. People were hugging him. They were crying. And it went on and on. I was in a lot of shock. I was still there when he now came and told me a few days later, the old man has rested. Wow. And again, we went to the family. This time I was in a black suit. And when we entered the compound, I heard the sound of singing. And everybody was in white. And they were celebrating. And there was a casket. And there was singing, jubilating. Everybody was in white. There was cake. There was food. There was a feast. I was very confused. And then I asked this guy, first of all, you are a terrible host. You did not prepare me for any of this. I mean, this is bad. I'm the only one in a black suit. People are in such happy spirits. He told me, but you are here when we were mourning. We finished. He told me, for us, when you're sick and you're certain of dying, that's when we cry. And we tell you stuff when you can hear us. And we settle matters there. Once you are dead, you cannot hear us. And that is a time to celebrate you. And the place is in color and food. They were eating food. Again, this is just God's amazing tapestry of variety around the world. And it is helping to appreciate that people do things differently. I wish we could understand that here at home, so that we are not holding each other in suspicion, but we are educating each other. But I just want to say thank you so much. I've learned so much from your expertise. I have missed Mosanjo's journalism today, but thank you very, very much for your inputs and your insights, Mweni. We wish you so many blessings with your book that you're setting up. I believe it is very, very timely, coming at a time when we need very, very much. Asanteni sana, Rosalind. Thank you for this idea. I think we should find a way to make it a lot more frequent.
Yeah, and thank you, Reverend Fundachi, for accepting just to sit here with us for 3 weeks, because I know you're a busy person, but you accepted and you've come and you've given us your wisdom and your insight. Asante sana, and may God bless you. Now, when could you tell us more about it? I don't know if you want to share it on the screen or something. If you are ready, you can share just a brief about your book and your book launch and when is it and what to expect and the excitement that we're having.
Okay, I don't have capacity to share, but we can share in verbally. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm hosting an event called Hope. It's essentially about we're talking about the hope in grief, hope in seasons of grief. And where is this coming from? These two books have literally been a labor of love. The first book is called Grief, is a work of heart. And this book is a 60-day devotional from the aching, the asking to the arising. Yeah. And this is a 3-step journey of grief. And in this devotional, we look at different dimensions of loss in its many forms. We look at bereavement, we look at betrayal, we look at transitions of life, we look at broken relationships, we even look at the quiet death of a dream. And so we look at these things, there's a lot of storytelling, a biblical reflection, and we also have practices that we can engage in so that we have a sacred space to find meaning, to renew strength, to find courage. And essentially we are saying that grief does not have a quick fix. That's what we are saying. Sit with the discomfort of it and allow yourself to feel the emotions of the day. The second book is actually very close to my heart. This is Navigating the High Seas of Healing. This is based on Psalms 23. It's my favorite psalm in the Bible, and it's also said to be the most read part of the Bible the world over. And the reason why this is so close to my heart is, I don't know whether you know this, Rev and Rosalind, but December 2020, on the 21st of December was my birthday. Well, is, because 21st of December every year is my birthday. But on the morning of my birthday in December 2020, my dad passed on. And so it continues to be a grief I navigate every day. However, very quickly, we lay my dad to rest on the 31st of December. But when I was laying my dad to rest, and I'm a daddy's girl through and through. So I knew that this next year I need to find an anchor for grief that is going to carry me through. I knew that I needed to find a love that is not going to change. And so for me, I was led to, I felt that the verse that spoke to me was Psalms 23. And so every day in the year 2021, I read Psalms 23. I read it in English, I read it in Swahili, I read it in Kikamba. There's even a Sheng version. I read it in all those versions. And it was sit and read. Because remember that many of us, we even know a song in different versions of Psalms 23. And sometimes what happens with Psalms 23 is that it's so easy to sing the words and forget that it is the written, living, dynamic, transformative word of God. And so I actually would stop, sit, read. And so every day I read that psalm. And so the high seas is actually every sea, every verse broken down to a C word, and it's a 40-day devotional. Now, ultimately, what I'm hoping that we'll be able to do with this devotionals is that we'll be able, one, to find a companion that walks with you, something that understands your journey. But also, we can even use this in our Bible studies. We can use this in a community of faith. When we are all grieving, this can be a book where we can read and then now understand. Because remember, we all have different perspectives, and we can sit together and sit with the discomfort of grief and make reference to this book as a guide, as a companion, whether it is you who's grieving or you're working with somebody else. You can say, you know what, my colleague is grieving, and so every day lunchtime we read a passage from the book and discuss it and work together and help them. So karibuni. The launch is happening on the 7th of December at the National Museum of Kenya, at the Luiliki Auditorium at 3 p.m. Entrance is free. absolutely free. Please come join us. It doesn't matter what grief you're going through. We are creating a sacred space. Please come. Come, let's talk about grief. I know I got a question from someone who asked, am I allowed to come even if my grief is complex? And I said, come. What we are creating is a place where we can grieve together, because when we grieve together, something happens. When we grieve together, it allows us to heal in the presence of one another. Pain is softened when it is seen, and our stories find dignity when they are heard. And that's a space that we are offering for the conversation on the 7th of December at 3 p.m.
Wow, and that's amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and it's also a good gift to give also to friends and family.
Yes,
who might be going through
in the hands of every pastor.
And
one of the other things I need to mention is that we are creating a forum for wounded healers. Pastor Ondachi, you would be very happy to know the keynote speaker at the launch of my book is one Reverend John Gishinga. So we're not standing and saying, thumping our chests that we are the guys. No, we are saying we are wounded healers. We are walking this journey as sojourners in this space. We are walking together. We are not exempted. In fact, we have been right there where people have been in terms of their grief stories.
What a good choice. What a good choice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tom, in absentia. And we really missed you today. You missed the questions that I had for you. But I know you were going through, a family wasn't well, so he was taking care of the family. Thank you, Mweni, and I wish you all the best in your book launch. And if I'm around, I'll definitely pop by. And thank you, Reverend Dachi, for just creating time and being here with us and discussing about grief and how it affects and impacts ourselves, the culture, and the nation. So with that, I want just to say goodbye and Merry Christmas. Until next year when we look for another topic to discuss.
Yes, thank you.
We should,
Bye.
Okay.